On the night of September 10, 2001, a 31-year-old doctor walked into a department store 2 blocks from the World Trade Center. She bought lingerie, a dress, pantyhose, bed linens. Then she crossed to another counter and bought 3 pairs of shoes. A security camera caught all of it. That footage, grainy, ordinary, forgettable, would become the last confirmed image of her that would ever exist. 9 hours later, the World Trade Center was gone, and so was she. For the next 7 years, courts, investigators, and her own family would fight over a single question that nobody could actually answer. Did Dr. Sneha Anne Philip die in the September 11th attacks, or did she disappear the night before them, for reasons that had nothing to do with terrorism at all? Before we get into what happened, you need to understand who Sneha Philip was, because almost everything about this case turns on the gap between the life she was known to live and the life investigators say she was actually living underneath it. She was born on October 7, 1969, in Kerala, India, one of 3 children. Her family emigrated to the United States while she was young, eventually settling in Hopewell Junction, a small town in New York's Dutchess County. She was smart, genuinely, obviously smart. She graduated from Johns Hopkins University in 1991 and a few years later enrolled at the Chicago School of Medicine to become a physician. It was in Chicago that she met Ron Lieberman, a fellow med student a year behind her. They fell into the kind of relationship built on shared ambition and shared taste. He played music, she painted. She even took a year off from her own path, traveling through Italy, just so the 2 of them could graduate together and start their careers side by side. They moved to New York City for their medical internships. Lieberman went to Jacobi Medical Center in the Bronx. Philip went to Cabrini Medical Center in Manhattan. In May of 2000, they got married, a small ceremony in Dutchess County, blending Jewish and St. Thomas Syrian Christian traditions. Lieberman gave her a minu, a traditional Malayali wedding pendant, a gold teardrop set with a diamond. Shortly after the wedding, they moved into a new apartment, not just anywhere, Battery Park City in Lower Manhattan, a few blocks from the World Trade Center. By every outward measure, this was a golden couple story. 2 doctors, married, building a life together in one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the country. But underneath that, in the months before September 2001, things had already started coming apart. September 10, 2001, was a Monday. Philip had the day off. That morning, she got on an online chat with her mother, a conversation that would later matter enormously, and they talked for nearly 2 hours. At one point, Philip mentioned she was thinking about visiting Windows on the World, the restaurant complex at the top of the North Tower, where a friend of hers was set to get married the following spring. She said she might do a little shopping at the mall inside the Trade Center too. At 4 p.m. she signed off. She dropped some clothes at a local dry cleaner. Then she walked into Century 21, the massive discount department store directly across the street from the World Trade Center, and started shopping. She used the couple's American Express card, lingerie, a dress, pantyhose, bed linens. Then she went to an annex of the store and bought 3 pairs of shoes. A security camera recorded her the entire time. That tape and the credit card receipts attached to it are the last confirmed proof that Sneha Philip existed anywhere, doing anything, that anyone can point to with certainty. Lieberman got home after midnight. Philip wasn't there. He wasn't alarmed. By his own account, she'd been staying out late, sometimes all night, for a while by that point. He figured he'd talk to her about it later. He went to bed. He had to be up early for work. Investigators would later discover something Lieberman didn't remember at the time. At 4 a.m., someone called his cell phone from their apartment landline. He has no memory of answering it. He thinks he might have half woken up and checked his voicemail, then gone back to sleep. At 6:30 a.m., he got up for work. Philip still wasn't home. 2 hours later, American Airlines Flight 11 hit the North Tower. Here's where the case either becomes a 9/11 story or stops being one entirely, depending on who you believe. That evening, After the attacks, Lieberman used his medical credentials to get past the security perimeter and back into their apartment. The window had been left open. Dust from the collapsed towers had settled over everything inside. There were paw prints tracked through it, from the couple's 2 kittens. There were no human footprints in the dust. Philip was reported missing, along with hundreds of others in the days after the attacks. Her family put up flyers across the city, the same way thousands of other families were doing for people who'd actually been confirmed inside the towers. At one point, in what she'd later admit was a desperate attempt to get media attention for her case, Philip's brother falsely told reporters he'd heard from her during the attack. He hadn't. Lieberman called American Express, learned about the shopping trip the night before, and started distributing flyers to other Century 21 locations. A store clerk, who'd since been relocated to a Brooklyn branch, recognized Philip's photo and called. She remembered her as a regular customer, and she said something that would haunt the case for years. On the night of September 10th, she remembered Philip being with another young woman, possibly Indian. A friend, Philip had apparently told her. Lieberman spent 3 weeks combing through store surveillance tape looking for that second woman. When he finally found the footage, it showed his wife alone in the coat department. No second woman anywhere in frame. That thread, the unidentified woman who was never found, never came forward, never explained, is still, to this day, one of the strangest loose ends in the entire case. Frustrated that detectives seemed to have written the case off as just another 9/11 casualty, Lieberman hired a private investigator, Ken Gallant, and Gallant found something the NYPD hadn't surfaced: footage from the security cameras in the lobby of their own apartment building. Time-stamped at 8:43 a.m., 3 minutes before Flight 11 hit the North Tower, the footage shows a woman entering the building lobby, waiting briefly near the elevator, and then leaving again a few minutes later. The lighting is bad, sunlight is washing out the lobby, and the woman appears only as a silhouette. But her hair, her build, the way she was dressed, Philip's family says it's consistent with her. They say her mannerisms match. A NYPD investigator, who reviewed the tape later, testified he believed it was her. But here's the problem, and it's a real one. The woman in that footage isn't carrying any shopping bags. Philip had walked out of Century 21 the night before with lingerie, a dress, bed linens, and 3 pairs of shoes. None of that appears anywhere in the 8:43 footage. And once again, she's alone. Lieberman couldn't positively identify the woman as his wife. Nobody could. If that was her, if Sneha Philip really walked into her own apartment lobby 3 minutes before the first plane hit, then walked back out again, the most straightforward explanation is the one her family has always believed. She went home for a moment, then, as a doctor living blocks from a mass casualty event, turned around and headed straight toward the disaster to help. If it wasn't her, the question of where she actually was that morning, and for the 8.5 hours before it, reopens completely. For a long time, NYPD detectives weren't actively investigating Philip's disappearance at all. The department, like the rest of the city, was overwhelmed in the aftermath of the attacks, and her case had been folded into the general assumption that she was one of thousands who died at the site. When detectives eventually did dig in, what they found complicated the story considerably, and this is the part of the case that gets contested hardest, so it's worth being precise about what's documented versus what's disputed. Earlier in 2001, Cabrini Medical Center had declined to renew Philip's contract, citing repeated tardiness and alcohol-related issues. She was effectively let go. Shortly after learning this, she went out drinking with co-workers, an outing that ended with her spending the night in jail. She'd told police a fellow intern groped her during the incident. Prosecutors ultimately dropped the sexual abuse complaint and instead charged Philip herself with a misdemeanor, falsely reporting an incident. She refused to recant and was held overnight. According to police records, after losing her position at Cabrini, Philip began spending nights at bars around the city, including some catering to a rougher crowd, and would sometimes leave with women she'd met there. Her brother, according to the same police account, once discovered her with his then-girlfriend, a claim he has flatly and completely denied, saying he never even spoke to the detective who wrote it into the file. She landed a second internship at St. Vincent's on Staten Island, but ran into similar trouble there, including a suspension for missing a scheduled meeting with a substance abuse counselor. And then there's September 10th itself. That same morning, hours before she walked into Century 21, Philip had been formally arraigned on the false reporting charge from months earlier and pleaded not guilty. According to the police report, she and Lieberman got into a loud argument at the courthouse afterward about her drinking and her nights out. The fight ended, the report says, with her walking away and leaving him to go home alone. Lieberman disputes that this fight ever happened at all, so you have two competing files on the same 24 hours. One describes a woman under real strain, professionally, legally, personally, on the worst stretch of her adult life. The other describes a woman who, whatever she was going through, still went home, still planned a family dinner 2 days out, still chatted warmly with her mother about a friend's wedding, and then, like almost 3,000 other people that Tuesday morning, simply never made it home again. Her family has pushed back hard on nearly every part of the NYPD's version. They say she wasn't fired for drinking. She was let go, they claim, after raising complaints about racial and sexual bias at the hospital, though Cabrini told a reporter years later it had no record of any formal complaint from her. Lieberman doesn't deny she went to lesbian bars, but says it was to avoid repeating what happened with the coworker who'd groped her, and insists she never slept with the women she went home with. He says one night she came home covered in paint after spending the evening with an artist, listening to music. Neither version can be fully proven, and neither version has ever been fully disproven. By 2003, with the NYPD investigation concluded and no resolution in sight, Lieberman took the fight to court. He filed a petition in New York County Surrogates Court, the court that handles matters like this, asking a judge to formally declare that his wife had died in the September 11th attacks. Under New York law, this required something specific, clear and convincing evidence that Philip had been exposed to lethal danger at the World Trade Center that morning. Not just plausibility, not just grief, actual evidence. Lieberman's argument leaned on exactly what you'd expect: her medical training, her proximity, her mother's account of the online chat about visiting windows on the world. The NYPD investigator who'd authored the department's report on her personal life even testified, under oath, that he personally believed she probably had died in the attacks, despite everything his own investigation had turned up about her troubled final months. Standing against Lieberman was Ellen Winner, a court-appointed guardian ad litem representing Philip's interests in the proceeding. Winner introduced the NYPD's findings and argued there simply wasn't clear evidence placing Philip anywhere near the World Trade Center when the planes hit. On June 29, 2006, the judge, Renee Roth, ruled against Lieberman. She found there wasn't enough to establish that Philip died on September 11th, and instead set her legal date of death at September 10, 2004, exactly 3 years after she was reported missing, the default under state law when someone simply vanishes without a trace. For the family, this was devastating. It meant that legally, Sneha Philip's death had nothing to do with 9/11 at all. It meant she'd essentially just disappeared. Cause unknown, reason unknown, story unfinished. They appealed. This is where the case takes its strangest turn. Philip's family and their lawyers found a case to compare hers against: Juan Lafuente, a man from Poughkeepsie whose evidence of being at the World Trade Center that morning was, by any honest reading, just as thin as Philip's. He'd recently lost his job. He was a volunteer fire marshal, someone who, like Philip, might have had a personal reason to go toward danger rather than away from it. His office was 8 blocks from the Trade Center site. The evidence that he'd actually been there that morning came down to a second-hand account. Someone who frequented the same local deli claimed to have overheard Lafuente mention a meeting at the Twin Towers. That was enough. The Dutchess County Court accepted Lafuente's petition and ruled that he died in the attacks. Philip's family believed the difference wasn't the strength of the evidence, it was where the case was heard and who was asking. Lafuente's wife was the mayor of Poughkeepsie at the time. Philip's case had been heard in Manhattan, under tougher scrutiny, without that kind of institutional weight behind it. Despite being told the odds of a successful appeal were low, Lieberman and the family's attorney pushed forward anyway. On January 31, 2008, more than 6 years after Philip disappeared, a 5-judge appellate panel reversed the lower court's ruling. Writing for the majority, Judge David Sachs didn't pretend this was a clean case. His opinion opens with a simple, blunt line: "This is a disturbing case." He acknowledged head-on that there was no direct evidence putting Philip anywhere near the World Trade Center that morning. But he also laid out the legal standard clearly. Clear and convincing doesn't mean absolute certainty. It means the conclusion has to be highly probable. And Sachs's reasoning came down to this: given everything known about her, her training, her proximity, her documented plan to visit the Trade Center's restaurant, the ambiguous lobby footage, the simplest, most probable explanation was that she died there that morning. Anything else, he wrote, required what he called the rankest speculation. He also threw out the NYPD's characterizations of her personal life as a basis for the ruling, calling much of it hearsay that had never been properly introduced as evidence in the original hearing. One judge dissented. Bernard Malone Jr. wrote that nobody actually knew where Philip had spent the night of September 10th, which meant every claim about her route home or her proximity to the towers at the moment of the attack required speculation the court shouldn't be making. He noted that La Fuente's case, by contrast, had a more stable daily routine and independent evidence of his plans that morning. The degree of speculation is greater here, he wrote, but the majority ruled. Sneha Anne Philip was declared, officially, the 2,751st victim of the collapse of the Twin Towers. By the time the ruling came down, the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund had already closed years earlier. Lieberman would never receive any money from it. That was never really what this fight was about. What the ruling did give the family was Philip's name, officially, permanently, on the list. 6 months after the decision, in July 2008, the city formally notified the family that she'd been added. Today, Sneha Anne Philip is memorialized at the National September 11th Memorial's South Pool on Panel S66, alongside nearly 3,000 other names. Her family buried an urn of ashes from Ground Zero at a cemetery near their home, without a body to put inside it. They kept hoping, for years, that the jewelry she'd been wearing, including diamonds that could have survived the fires at the site, might eventually surface and be matched against family photographs. As far as public record shows, that never happened. Her parents have kept her childhood bedroom in Poughkeepsie exactly as it was, adding only photographs and her diplomas. Her mother visits the memorial each year, not on the anniversary of the attacks, but on Sneha's birthday. 2 memorial funds have been set up in her name in Kerala, one started by the family, funding treatment for indigent patients at a clinic near Aluva, another run by an association of Malayali physicians. Ron Lieberman remarried in 2010. By most accounts, he's remained close with his former in-laws ever since. And the case that's never actually closed, the one no ruling could touch, is the unidentified woman from the Century 21 tape. The one the store clerk remembered clearly, the one who was never in any footage anyone could find, who never came forward, and whose identity has never been established to this day. There's a line in Judge Sachs's ruling that stayed with people who followed this case for years. This is a disturbing case. Not because of what it proves, because of what it can't. A New York court decided, by legal standard, that Sneha Philip most likely died helping strangers on the worst morning in the city's modern history. That's the version her family has held onto for over 2 decades, and it may well be exactly what happened. But highly probable isn't the same as known. And there's a version of September 11th, 2001, where Sneha Philip's story has nothing to do with 2 hijacked planes at all, where the real answer is sitting somewhere in those 8.5 unaccounted for hours the night before, in a life that was already unraveling before a single plane ever took off. Nobody who could tell us which version is true has ever come forward. Not the woman from the Century 21 tape, not anyone who saw her between midnight and 8:43 a.m. No one at all. What do you think actually happened to her in those missing hours? Do you believe the court got it right? Or do you think the real story died with whoever that second woman was? Drop your theory in the comments. If you want to see more cases like this, the ones that got buried under bigger headlines, the ones the system never fully resolved, subscribe and turn on notifications, because we cover a new one every week.